I've been pretty busy, as has my associate producer Max, and we've been working on another new war game, which is releasing in January, specifically January 22nd. It's called War in Spain, 1936 to 39, and this isn't something we've mentioned at all before. So this is sort of the first reveal of it, as well as the release date announcement. I was mentioning earlier that a key part of Matrix Games' history was the release of War in the Pacific, and as part of that, after War in the Pacific was released and became sort of a real blockbuster game, some of the community came together and put together a development team that created a better version of War in the Pacific called War in the Pacific Admirals Edition. And the same guys that made War in the Pacific Admirals Edition have come together again, most of the same guys and a few new ones. And some of those new ones are actually from Spain, and decided to create a new theater-level operational war game that covers the entire Spanish Civil War. Now, this is, as part of their plan, the first in a series of new games that are based around the fundamental design of a War in the Pacific Admirals Edition, which means that it has very good capabilities for both air, naval, and land. That I'll talk a bit later. They've really put a lot of effort into expanding the land part of that for this game. And you can play as the Republicans or the Nationalists in single player, AI, hot seat, or play by email. And this is basically a prologue to World War II. So a lot of people talk about, the Spanish Civil War and all the things that matter there for Spain, but also for the larger world. A lot of the major powers that fought in World War II were involved and used this particular war as sort of a testing ground. They were supporting one side or the other, sending some of their early technology there, testing some of their doctrines. So it is also an attempt by each of them to tip the scales, for their favor side. And because of that, you also have sea lines of supply coming into Spain that matter. It's not just a land war.
How big is the map? Because when we talk about war in the Pacific, as in as opposed to war in the East and war in the West, you've got like different scale there. How is the map structured for war in Spain?
Well, in terms of the scope, it covers basically the Western Mediterranean around Spain, including the Balearic Islands, which our tutorial scenario actually is the invasion of the Balearics. It also covers southern France, as you can see, part of Switzerland and Italy, but the main fighting happens in Spain. In addition to that, though, and this is a key part of what they decided to do to be able to do land operations in the same level of detail that War in the Pacific does, air and naval, is to reduce the scale to 5 nautical miles per hex and to make ground combat much more detailed and to allow logistics to be more detailed. And all of that together means that in War in the Pacific, the land side of things, while it was very useful and very important, it was sort of the second cousin, if you will. Is less important than the air and naval part, the Pacific being the Pacific. But here, the land part is taking an equal level of importance and an equal level of detail with the rest on this 5 nautical mile per hex map. And you can see the level of detail they've put in here also in the North African part and in Spain. This map, by the way, extends much further than just Spain, and that's there for possible future use.
I find it fascinating that making a game using the same sort of structure, but with I would guess sort of a more self-contained conflict. Can allow for even more detail in many aspects. So it's interesting to see that. Is the team has the team chosen War in Spain because of the equipment or nations involved, or was it just like an interesting subject to start with?
Well, I think I mentioned, but part of the team is actually Spanish that have personal family history involved here as well. And they have access to the historical references and sources in Spanish. So I will say that both that personal family history and that access to additional primary sources made, I think, the whole team interested because they knew that they could do the most accurate historically detailed version of the Spanish Civil War, the war in Spain that's in our opinion never been done. And they thought that in doing this, it would also be a great test bed for them in a way to prove this new system that they've built, this new engine that they've built. It looks a lot like War in the Pacific, but I want to stress they have built a new engine. They're big fans of War in the Pacific, so it kind of looks and feels like War in the Pacific with updates, but it is a new engine. It's got a new AI, it's got a new logistics system, it's got a new ground system, and it's got amphibious operations now as well. So that I should mention the naval system now allows you even to deal with riverine amphibious warfare on top of the normal stuff. So the scale, as you mentioned, also makes it an ideal testing ground for this 5 nautical mile per hex type of game with smaller units than you got in the Pacific. And the beginning of the war in Spain, you had a lot of disorganization, if you will, as both sides got to figuring out how they would fight and who were their friends and who were their enemies and what's their new military organization going to be. And the system that they've built also allows for this sort of transition from small units to bigger units over time.
Well, one last question, and just because I'm very curious about it. You mentioned amphibious operations. How is that played in the game? How is that structured? It's a very interesting subject because, of course, Spain, is, of course, there's a lot of water around it. But I was curious to know because it's an interesting extra aspect to the game.
Yeah, well, I'll say 2 things about this. The first is that the level of detail is unmatched in terms of being able to plan and coordinate an amphibious operation, because the game goes down to individual ships, individual units, and you get to load them onto the individual ships. You get to form task forces. You get to plan your operations, load up the supplies, and then bring them to where you want and unload them and fight and all that. So all that's in the game at a more detailed resolution than in War in the Pacific. But in addition to that, I think a lot of people look at the map of Spain and think, well, there's a lot of water around there, but they think of the Spanish Civil War as a ground war. And while a lot of it is a ground war, I should note that this is also one of the cases in history where you have, as they put it, the fleet that fought itself. Part of the fleet went for the nationalists, part of the fleet ended up with the Republicans, and then you had some of the best ways for the other nations that were trying to support one side or the other to get supplies and equipment to Spain was by the sea route. So there was attempted interdiction of some of those sea routes of supply and resupply. And the tutorial scenario is, in fact, an invasion of the Balearic Islands, where you have to immediately go off and head off to Mallorca and see what you can do with some, relatively unready troops.
It's just amazing. So just a few months. I mean, is the game? Is there a chance for beta? How's that work for the guys out there willing to play the game?
Yes, we have been in beta testing for a while. We are still in beta testing and will be right up until release. So we will be doing more beta recruitment for this. We're also just go back to Ruled Waves 3. I should mention we're about to do a big announcement and beta wave for that. So if you're interested in either of these games and helping polish them as they get to release, please keep your eyes open for that.
That's great. So again, matrixgames.com/beta, and you'll have all the information to apply to our betas as we announce them. Make sure that you keep an eye on that. Eric, thank you very much for joining us. It's great that you are able to still make us excited about hacks and turns and all this great stuff. The reaction in the chat is also very, very positive about it. So thank you for sharing all these news with us.